YouTube, and welcome to another video by the Happy Woodworker. Today we're continuing on my other video on chess piece design. Today we are going to be seeing, can we duplicate the process? Now, I've evolved my design a little bit from the design video that you saw. One of the things I've done is to put a slightly different edge on my step. Again, I don't know, it's kind of angled. We'll see if the camera can pick that up. And I've done the same thing on the steps that are in here. I've also added a slightly larger little step up in here underneath the ball. And as you can see, I've opted to go with a more Middle Eastern design on the ball instead of just having a round ball. So you're going to get to see those changes. But today's video is turning a chess pawn, and to see if we can duplicate this process 16 times, because you need 16 pawns. So we are going to start off by making some lines. I've already got my stock. These are just 4-inch blanks, turned down. We'll get them down to circumference, and then we'll see if we can get identical results. So I hope you've enjoyed the design process that I did so far. My design has kind of evolved over turning a couple of prototypes. I just did the one for you because it's all the same thing. It's just deciding what you like, what you don't like, and by a couple of happy accidents we came up with this design from my prototype video. So here we go. Without further ado, I'm going to make some marks on this, and I'm actually just going to turn it on. Sometimes this is a little easier by turning it on. So I'm going to line up that base where I had it, bring my pen in here, and I'm going to decide how wide I want that base to be. Again, we're trying to match what I already had. Right there. I'm going to cut in right here. Top comes to right there. Make sure I've got this all lined up. About there. And I'm going to come to right here. And my top. Right there. And then just to verify that I have the proper length, I'm going to start with my little measuring stick, line it up to my base, come in here and make a line on this. This is my absolute height. And this one I'm going to do by hand. There's no real reason why I couldn't just do this off the template, but I find that my height will vary just ever so slightly if I don't do it off the measuring stick. So I like that last one to be off the stick. So the next thing I'm going to do is come in with my set of calipers, and I am going to take a measurement off of here and off of here. Let's go ahead and set to our finish circumference, because I know I'm not anywhere near that yet, but I am kind of close, so I'll just go ahead and use that. So we're going to come in with a parting tool, a couple different parting tools to start our base. In my case, you may not have this particular set, but I've got a little little miniature set. It's made by Benjamin's Best that I like to use. As soon as I find my little mini parting tool, hold that thought. Right in front of me. So this is one of my Benjamin's Best, and again, this is a little tiny one. I have found this to be particularly useful, and also the little skew chisel that came in this set was very useful for this. So without further ado, here we go. We're going to start right on this line. I'm going to stop there, and then I'm going to mark my height. So that's my maximum height. So now I've got my chest pawn will set in between those two cuts. Alright, next up we're going to pull out the big parting tool, and I'm going to start cutting my base. Let's get that down to circumference. And I'm there perfectly. You can tell by doing a couple of prototypes already, I've already learned where to stop, and you'll also notice that my mark from my pen was just a hair off. I know that my base is the exact width of my parting tool. So sometimes you'll find little differences like that. So next up, we're going to start to cut in, and I'm going to come up to here. That's my max. That's right on my line. I'm going to start in the middle and work at both directions. I'm going to come right to the edge of my base. See if I can trim that edge just a little. There we go. Get little fuzzies off of there. Okay. Next up is here. I've got a cooling fan plus air filtration just above the camera, so hopefully everybody's hearing me okay today. Going to cut some of that out of the way. That's all going to get knocked down. So if I compare here, I am just a little bit high. So I'm actually going to knock these back just a hair more. That's part of the deal here, is getting this to match perfectly, which is going to take some time and some work. My trick for this is to hold the one that you've already got cut right next to the one that you're cutting, where you've got a good view, look down at it, and make sure you get it to where it matches. So I've also got to cut in on this one a little, and I'll even that as I go. So we're going to start to bead this over too. And I'm just using my large skew chisel for this. So I've got to knock this down a little bit as well. I don't want this any bigger than my base, so I'm actually going to shave that down just to where it almost matches perfectly. And then we're going to start to bead this. Same thing from the top. I'm being very gentle. I just want to shape it, that's all. my chess pieces, I have much more of an angle on the bottom of this than I do on the top. The top comes in almost flat. So, I still need to knock the top down just a little bit. I'm a little too high, and that's okay. I've got room for adjustments in here. That looks better. So now let's bead that over. Now I'm going to come in just flat, touch the edge, and as I work back and forth, I will shape my bead. Again, I'm just making little micro adjustments. And so we can make this where it looks a little better for you, I'm going to come in with a parting tool right next to it. About there. So, alright, next up I've got to come up to here and we've got to start to get all of this wood out of the way. So I've got to come up to this first line right here, and I'm just looking to make sure my lines still look correct, and they do. Got everything set where I want it. So we're going to come up to right there. And for this I'm just going to continue with my skew chisel. We'll switch over in a minute. Again, flat against my tool rest. I'm just using this back corner to just pull right through this. Just gutting out all the excess. You're going to use a big tool like this, make sure you don't hit what you've already cut and you want to keep, like your bead over here. Alright, from there I'm going to switch over to my spindle gouge. We're going to start shaping this. From doing a couple of prototypes, I have a good idea of what I want for circumference here, so we'll take an actual measurement in a minute when I think I'm close. I also know pretty much how far back I want this little step right here to be. I'm going to work myself back towards that, but I am going to go ahead and take my little mini skew and I'm going to put that step in there just to see where I'm at. I can tell you that's still way too wide. So we're going to cut back into that a little. When using this, you've got to kind of decide where you want the cutting edge to be against the wood. You can cut with the tip to get down into this. You can use the sides to produce this nice edge here and this curve. You also turn your tool as you go. And sometimes I also rotate. This is a tool that takes a little while to get used to, but you can do amazing things with it. looks about right. Let's compare. I think I could stand to go maybe just a hair more, but we'll finish that with sanding. You've also got to remember what you're going to sand is going to take a little off. If you are experiencing tear out, it's best to come at this almost with the point of view of just I want to take off nothing but sawdust when I'm finishing. So I'm going to get a measurement on this. You take off just a little tiny bit at a time. It does make a difference. And I want my measurement here. It's actually been pretty easy to produce this curve by always using the same tool. Don't ask me why that is. Sometimes you would think you'd get quite a bit of variance in that, but you don't. It comes out virtually identical. Now maybe that's just from my experience of turning. A little bit further. Switched over to a parting tool just to knock down some of the stuff that's left over. There we go, we're there. So now we're going to make the rest match that. And I'm going to angle this a little more. Now, the only thing I want straight is what I cut with the parting tool. So now I'm reducing my cut. I'm just taking off little bits of sawdust here. This just makes the finishing process easier for me. I'm being very, very light with my tools. Just barely touching that. And we're there. Okay. I could stand to straighten it a little more, but we're there. Next up is to prepare our little steps here. And remember, you can always come back in and take off more wood later, so it's better to take off less than what you think you're going to need, and then you can come back to it. And then I know that I want to split this in half because I've got two steps. There's enough for a line. Let me see how I look. Yeah, that looks almost like half. We'll go with that. Alright. Next up, I'm going to come back to my little miniature parting tool, and I'm also going to compare this. I think we are pretty much right on the money. So for this one, I'm going to hug this side of the line a little. I'm going to stop right there. So now I've got to start shaping the ball. And I'm going to do this just like the prototype. I'm actually going to produce a ball before I go to that European design or that Middle Eastern design. So we're going to start by coming in with a skew chisel. And I'm going to be a little aggressive with this. A lot of this has to come out. When it gets down time for me to start shaping it, I'm going to be a lot less aggressive. just pretty aggressively hogging that off. Again, I know I've got to go pretty far. Being this aggressive though is going to leave you with tear out. So before I reach my final size, I'm going to make some changes. For one, I'm going to switch to a slightly smaller skew chisel. It's easier to get in here. And when you think you're getting to be within, probably a 32nd of an inch to your finished size, you want to start taking off much smaller amounts. Now that I'm also keeping a perfect edge here from my height. Once I've knocked that down so far, then I can start cutting into this for access. But I am being careful to keep that flat edge there so I know just how tall I can go. Maybe you have a different method. That's mine for making sure my height is correct. So right now I'm more concerned with the bottom half of this ball. I want this, because that's the part of the ball that's going to be left. Remember, we're going to hog this away so that it has an inward angle like this. So I'm now taking my time and I'm being more careful around the bottom. I'm not taking off as much. All I'm doing is taking off sawdust because I think I'm getting pretty close to where I'm supposed to be. Still a little too ovaled on this ball, but it's close. So let's take a measurement. That's my next step. Go back to my calipers. And I'm going to take a measurement from my widest point from side to side. Side to side on a circle. How do you like that? Okay, I am going to right there. And then I'm going to check this, and ooh, look at that. I'm close. Just the middle. I knew I was getting there. But see the difference? This is kind of smooth, and this, where it was rough cut with a spindle gouge, has some tear out. It's kind of rough. That's the difference that you're going to get by taking your time and taking off smaller amounts of wood at a time. So just by taking off little tiny amounts, little bits of sawdust, I'm getting a much better result. At least I do with my tools. I don't know if that's true for everybody, but that's the way it works for my tools. I used just a little mini parting tool cut in there a little bit. I could have just gone back to my skew. Speaking of skews, I'm going to switch over to my little miniature one now. This works just like the bigger ones. You just have better access. The trick to this is it's much more sensitive where it's a smaller tool. It will cut right into your wood and leave you with a mess if you're not careful. But that's okay. At this point, what we're looking to do I got some more to go. For that, let me go back to my regular. I just got a little better control on this one. That little one is great for detail work, but I do have a little better control with a larger tool. And that's probably because your movements, the handles are so long, it takes a lot more movement by you to generate more movement here, whereas a smaller tool, when you move that, you really move that. So if you were doing round ball, this is exactly how you would do it. You could also generate a perfect round ball with a piece of pipe. I actually found another guy on YouTube that knows that secret the other day. I like watching other people's YouTube videos too. I find them very interesting. There's more than one way to skin a cat. That ought to have us pretty close. Yeah, just the very middle. And we'll end up knocking that down by taking the top down. So now we're going to go for that Middle Eastern look to this particular set. So here we go. I'm coming in not quite straight. I'm a little skewed because I've got to aim for the middle here. And my cut is going to come back just about to the middle of the ball. I'm going to start hogging this off. I'm aggressively doing this. Before I finish, I'll stop and go back to just taking sawdust cuts. Cutting like this will leave you tear out. Again, I'm not sure if you can see, well, you probably can see the difference between this surface and this surface. But you may not be able to actually see. If you take real aggressive cuts, you are going to get some tear out. I had decided that I didn't want to have a very, very sharp edge up here, so I'm just gently rounding this as we go. This is also going to finish me off, take me down to that final circumference that I wanted. Okay, so some of the next things that I wanted to do was to put a step on this, or to give it an angle, and on these as well, but I've got to get my circumference on those first. A lot of this is just stopping to take measurements against your prototype, and you should plan on doing several prototypes, because if you're using all the same wood, you're going to want to stain one set. What did I just measure? I measured that. So, I need to take that down some more. Sometimes when you're thinking or talking, you lose track of what you're doing. If you come in at a high angle, you're going to tear some of your fibers a little bit. For some reason, with these, it helps to come in almost straight. When I take off there, I'm going to take off here. I know I want that bottom step half the height or half the depth or circumference of this top one, and I got to go a little bit more. And I'm using a parting tool for this instead of my skew because the skew will tear the fibers more. I'm looking to have a pretty clean edge. That ought to be pretty close. Yeah, we're there. Okay. So now I'm going to take that little mini skew and I'm going to put my little concave angle in here. Again, I'm just taking off sawdust. If I'm too aggressive with a small little tiny step like that, I'm just going to tear it. And you can pretty much see the finished result. I mean, I have some more little details to do. I need to get a measurement on this step right here, which I generally like to match to the ball, to be honest. Yeah, that's pretty close right there. So I'll bring that down till I'm at least there. Again, I'm going to go back to the parting tool till I have it where I want it. That just happened to be another feature that I added. Okay. There we go, and I'm going to even this up a little too. There we go. And I think we're pretty much good there. I've got to do a couple more quick things. I haven't cut down this big one yet, so that's going to be my next step, is to get a measurement on that. So we're going to bring this down, and the way I've done these is I've got this and this and this all set to the same circumference or very close to it. I mean, I can almost eyeball these. I still like to have an actual measurement on it. But you know what? Sometimes it's nice to keep it simple. You keep it simple, you're going to be very happy. The more cuts and the more complicated you make it, the more likely it's going to be harder to reproduce. Not to say that you can't do it. You can do anything as complicated or as elaborate as you want. This is actually a pretty simple design. There we go, we're there. Alright, so I'll finish that up with some sanding while it's still on the lathe. First I'll take a file set to it because I just like to use files. It just seems to make my life so much easier. And then I'll take the sandpaper to it after that. I'll run a parting tool into here a little bit more so this will be easier to separate. I like to finish these on a bandsaw. There's no reason why you can't part this directly on the lathe though. But definitely do it after you have it sanded. That will make your life easier. So there you go. And let's compare to my template here, see how we did. Sometimes you do have to make minor little changes. My height is just about right on the money. I do have a couple little things to do. I've got this just a little bit wide, so I'll take a parting tool to this and narrow that down just a little bit. Again, I'm okay with too wide. It's when you're too narrow that you have a problem because you can't put the wood back. So, and I know on camera it looks like this one's taller. It's not. It's just that it's closer to the camera. They are virtually identical for height. So, hopefully that gives you a good idea. And if you wanted to know how I came up with this design, I literally just used my tools, came up with a rough design, and then it kind of evolved from there. You should definitely plan on having some prototypes and spares. This particular set's for my son, so I did a couple already that I just put some stains and some dyes on, some oils, and you should also plan on having a few that you're going to mess up. I mean, let's face it, you're going to cut 16 of these, you're going to mess up at least 4 or 5 of them. So figure that into your wood calculations when you're calculating how much wood you need to buy. Alright, I hope everybody's enjoyed. Thank you for watching another episode by the Happy Woodworker. Don't forget to stop and smell the sawdust, folks. Have a great day.